Thank you for joining us in this study of the book of 1 Thessalonians. Today we're in 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, and we never made it to verse number 13 yesterday, so we're going to pick up with verse number 13 today. Now the Apostle Paul in verse number 12, and let's just go ahead and read 12 and 13 together so we get the whole context here. He says, "We request of you, brethren, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord, and give you instruction, that you esteem them very highly in love because of their work, and live in peace with one another." What's the Apostle Paul saying? Again, the Apostle Paul is not just talking to those who are in leadership positions in the body of Christ. The Apostle Paul, I believe, is talking to all of those who have worked to encourage you and have worked to build you up. And by the way, that is the objective of the Church of Jesus Christ. We need to be working to encourage one another. We need to be diligently working to building up of one another. Again, taking this in context with verse number 11. Now, verse number 13, the Apostle Paul adds to this, and he says, "So that you esteem them very highly in love because of their work." What's he talking about? That you consider them, that you value them, that you honor them, and that you honor them highly. And again, he's not just talking about those who are in leadership. How many of you have got someone in your life that's not in a place of leadership in the church, but they are constantly encouraging you and constantly building you up? Well, you know what? You need to value them. You need to esteem them highly. You need to speak well of them. You need to consider them of great value, to be of great value to you. And you need to let them know that. You know what happens when you esteem someone, you know what you're doing? You're encouraging them to continue on in the work that they're doing. So esteem your brothers and sisters who are building you up, who are encouraging you. Now this word, it says to esteem them highly. The word highly there means to do it in superabundance. You know what? I don't believe you can do too much of encouraging and esteeming, lifting up those who are encouraging you. You know, it's really a very cyclic. It's you are encouraged, you encourage them. You are encouraged, you encourage them. And you're just constantly building the body of Christ. Now let's go to the last part of verse number 13. Live in peace with one another. Live in peace with one another. Live in this place of quietness with one another. Stop fighting. Stop arguing. But get into this place where you're building and building and building up each other. And then you're esteeming someone, and in you're esteeming someone, you're building them up. What a wonderful example that the Apostle Paul here is giving to the church at Thessalonica. Now, let's move on to verse number 14. "We urge you, brethren." Now notice in verse 12 he said, "We request you." Now he's saying, "We urge you." How many of you know urging is a little more severe than requesting? In other words, Paul is saying, this is something you need to do. "We urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, and be patient with everyone. Admonish the unruly." What's he talking about? Well, the word admonish means to warn. It means to say, you know what? You need to stop doing what you're doing. You need to turn things around. It means to warn. It means to stand up and say, warning, 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 you're going down the wrong path. Now, this word unruly means those who are out of order. How many of you know that there are members of the body of Christ who are out of order? Well, we, as the body of Christ, we need to be encouraging them. We need to be building them up. But we also need to be saying to them, you know what? What you're doing is not healthy. What you're doing is not good. You are out of order in your life. How many of you know that sometimes believers can get very out of order? They don't do the things that they're supposed to be doing, and they don't do them in an orderly way. Well, we as believers, we are commissioned by the Apostle Paul to admonish them, to warn them, not to change them. You can't change them, but you can warn them. And then he goes on and he says this, and encourage the faint-hearted. You know what? Let me just say this to you. I believe everyone in the body of Christ has been faint-hearted at one time or another. You know, the tragedy is this, is that there are people that were in the body of Christ that were faint-hearted. And instead of being encouraged, they were discouraged. People would say, what's wrong with you? How come you don't have the joy of the Lord? Well, how many of you know that is not very encouraging? What are we supposed to do when we see a person that's faint-hearted? We're supposed to go up to them and encourage them. Maybe it's just say, hey, brother, sister, is there something I can pray with you about? Can I help you in some way? How many of you know just the offer of help is an encouragement? And so what's Paul saying? He's saying those who are faint-hearted, you know, we as believers, we need to go to them. Instead of casting them out, instead of treating them like a second-rate citizen, we need to go to them and encourage them. And then he says, help the weak. Now, I don't believe that this is necessarily meaning physical weakness, even though it could pertain to that. I believe he's talking about those who are weak in faith. You know what? We need to go to those who are weak in faith and say, you know, what can I do to help you? You know, the Apostle Paul in these verses, as he's giving practical instruction, he's talking about something that's going to make the Church of Jesus Christ stronger. So he says to those who are weak, to those who are weak in faith, to those who are morally weak, go to them and help them. Help them. Give them a helping hand, so to speak. And then the last part of verse number 14, and be patient with everyone. Whoa, that's a big one. How many of you know there's sometimes we're really tempted to not be very patient with certain members of the body of Christ? We want to just get rid of them. We want to ostracize them. Well, you know what? The Apostle Paul tells us, be patient with everyone. Our time is up for today and for this week. Join us again next week as we continue our study through the book of 1 Thessalonians.